everybody. I am Marina Malagudi, and I'm your host at Unbossed. Unbossed is a podcast I've created to highlight women with amazing paths of success here in Chicago. Last year, I set out to interview the only 40 female CTOs in the city, and this year I've expanded to female CEOs and women in politics and government in Chicago. I'm excited to share these interviews with you, and I hope you contact me at www.unbossed.io or email me at marina@unbossed.io. Hope to see you soon.
Emily Achler is CEO and co-founder at Italic Type. She believes in using our times and skills to make the world a better place. She's a creative entrepreneur on a mission to develop human-centered technology and help more people read more books through the power of decentralized virtual book clubs. She's also a seasoned freelancer writer and content strategist. In writing for clients, she specializes in data-focused short and long-form content that crisply and clearly informs readers on the important information they want to know. She's worked in a number of different B2B and technology industry and can synthesize layered complex topics into simple, accessible core concept. Welcome, Emily.
Hey everybody, this is Marina, your host at Unbossed. My guest today is Emily Achler. She is co-founder at Italic Type. Welcome, Emily.
Hi, it's great to be here.
I am very excited to have a woman tech founder on the podcast. And one as young as you are, because usually what I've noticed is that the women that I have interviewed thus far are a little bit older and a little bit more professionally experienced. And so I'm super interested about your experience as a young woman in tech founding a new company here in Chicago. But before we do that, can you tell us a little bit about Emily, like a story about you growing up, and are you local from Chicago, or give us some context?
Sure. I grew up in the Chicago area, north suburbs, and some things about me growing up. I have been involved in book clubs basically my entire life. As I look back and realize it, I was a part of my junior high's book club with our school librarian. That was sort of my main extracurricular activity in middle school. So I was one of those kids, sort of. And in high school, I was voted most likely to organize a protest.
Oh, nice.
By my class, my senior year. And so as I look back on my life, there's certain, themes that sort of like emerge and pop out to me. Kind of unbeknownst to me, I have kind of always been interested and involved in book club type activities. And I think another thing about me is that I've always sort of had a very keen sense and awareness of fairness and justice. And sometimes, that takes the form of trying to, organize kids around a protest. And as I've gotten older, it has taken the form of trying to spend my time in a professional capacity to work on the problems that seem most pressing to me.
Nice. What did that look like in junior high and high? Like, how were you rallying up all of your classmates and other people, and what were you fighting about, really?
Well, I think that I have always been a really big reader. I've always been, even as a child, really interested in politics and history, and grew up doing a lot of political activity and organizing with my mom in particular. And so I think I maybe just had a little bit more of an extra awareness about, issues and that sort of experience when I was younger than my classmates had at the same age. So I think I was always thought of as somebody who was like a super politically engaged person. Yeah. As everyone sort of got older in college, and I think it's become more de rigueur as adults to, be interested, observers of what's happening in the political scene. But, I was sort of that sort of unusual, 14, 15-year-old teen, really into the West Wing, like really, into the idea of going to DC and working on Capitol Hill just from a really young age.
Oh, that's awesome. Did you take these issues on with your parents, and how did they feel about the discourse that was happening at home, probably,
Yeah. They really encouraged a lot of, healthy debate, and we were always talking about, issues and watching the news and things like that. But certainly as I got older, and I sort of didn't drop these things, I kind of kept on going, they started to have questions about, what I was posting online, and being concerned, about some of the bolder statements that I was making. But a funny anecdote is that during the 2008 presidential election, so Barack Obama's first election, I started a political blog with a friend of mine when we were in school called John McCain is a Robot. And it was just, satire.
Brilliant.
Sort of in the very satiric, sort of in the form of Jon Stewart and Bill Maher. And my, did not have a really big readership. My parents and some of my family would read it, and then my aunt would tell my mom, oh, Emily's posting, maybe stuff that's going to get, maybe it's going to hurt her job prospects, because at the time I was applying for jobs, kind of coming out of college. And the twist here is that my very first job out of college was at PBS.
Yes.
And in fact, having that blog helped me get that job. They thought, the team that ultimately hired me thought it was funny and interesting, and they liked it. And I think that is sort of what helped me secure my first job. So I got to kind of say haha to my mom and aunt.
Oh, that's awesome. That is so cool. I like how bold you seem. Even just talking to you, I can tell and that you've had strong opinions about this, and I'm glad you've advocated for more readership, because my listeners know this. I don't know if you know this about me, but I love books too, and I'm an avid reader, so I'm super excited that this Italic Type exists. And I actually want to check it out. I may start using it myself. So you went to school here in Illinois, correct?
I went to high school in Illinois, and I went to college in Washington, D.C.
In Washington, D.C.? Okay, nice. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you got a BA in international development and geography.
Yes.
And you were what? Do you know exactly what you were going to do with that? Because I don't know.
No, I did not.
What is that international? Is it a science degree, or what type of degree is it?
No, it's the overall major was international relations and foreign policy.
Okay.
So, and the focus on international development was about sort of aid and less developed regions, and how to accelerate more economic development and gender equality and things like that.
Oh, that's awesome. And so you got out thinking that you were going to get what, and then got what?
I thought, perhaps of taking the U.S. Foreign Service exam and going into the State Department, perhaps trying to get a job on the Hill in Congress. But over time in D.C., and as it happens, I think perhaps when you do start to get a little older, I got a little disillusioned, I think, with sort of the political machinery process of change. I'm always interested in kind of identifying what are the big problems that we have, and how are we going to fix them. And it seemed to me like after sort of looking into it, I don't know about going to work in Congress. I don't know if that's the best way to go about it. When I was in college, I also wrote for my school newspaper, and I was the film critic of the college newspaper. So I was an arts columnist and the film critic. And I thought, well, maybe I'll give media a go a little bit. And that's how I ended up at PBS. But I, the career path that I've had to date has been rather, twisty and turny a little bit. I can kind of see in retrospect that there are some like through lines that connect the dots, but I didn't have a plan, of like how one thing was going to lead to the other.
Yeah, don't we all? Like, I love to talk a little bit more about that. It's like, so not to diminish your timeline here, but just giving people a representation of what your resume looks like. You work for PBS, then you started going more social at Ogilvy Public Relations Worldwide, Redbox, still on the social side, and then Clear Energy Trust, still on the marketing, communication, social side, continuing to write, content writing, and now Italic Type.
Yes.
And so I can definitely I myself can, when I say those things and I repeat it back to you, I can definitely see the thread of I'm really great content writing, great reader, wanting to get into the community. Is that how you feel about your threads throughout as well?
Yes, I do think there is, absolutely that kind of that content aspect that runs through. Writing has always been a really big part of what I've done for a career. Some additional color here is that when I did start at PBS, I was the assistant in the PBS Kids Interactive department. So the people who produce pbskids.org and kids educational games.
Nice.
Really, really fun, super great first job. When I was there in 2008, it just so happened to be the time when Facebook and Twitter and other social media networks were opening the gates for brands to establish their brand presence online. And, this was back in the day when, Coca-Cola had their intern running their Facebook page. And it was sort of like, who's the youngest person in the room? You are, you do this project now. And so that's kind of how I happened to get into social media by by being the youngest person in the room at the time and setting up PBS Kids Facebook presence and Twitter presence and figuring out how to do a content calendar and how to source updates and posts from the different stakeholders and different departments that had relevant content and things like that. And it I was young and it seemed like, oh, there are a lot of, this is a growing area and there's going to be a lot of jobs here and they're going to need young people who know how to do this stuff. And it also involved writing, so it kind of seemed to me for a while like, oh, this is a way to incorporate writing and get to do writing for a living in this kind of growing, burgeoning space. And then as time went on, and the nature of social media sort of changed and my own relationship to it sort of changed, I just felt more and more that it's not entirely my passion area. It's not the thing that I wanted to continue to build on my career path on. It has a role. It's I use it personally. I use it professionally for Italic Type, but I did have to kind of start to take a step back and what had been really sort of kind of coincidental and happenstance, sort of how I ended up from like job to job, I started having to be just a lot more purposeful and intentional about like really what is it that I want to do.
And how did you find that out?
I mean, a couple things. So one is, just starting to like pay a lot more attention to how I feel when I'm doing certain activities. Like, because doing, when I do A, I tend to feel this way. When I do B, I feel this way. Just being a lot more aware of sort of my like, mental and emotional state, day to day, and like, performing certain tasks and things like that. And then, the other thing I did was sort of make the proverbial list of, well, what do I love to do? Yeah. And how I ended up transitioning from Clean Energy Trust to starting my own thing. And when I left, I did not know that was what I was going to do, was, made this list of like, what do I love? What are the things that like really light me up and make me happy? And at the top of my list was running my book club in Chicago that I've been running for the last 7 years here. That has been, a huge inspiration for starting Italic Type. And just had this little like nagging thing, and just kept on coming back to this idea that what I really love and what I think is important, and for me and for a lot of people, is learning and growing together in community, reading great books and talking to smart people about the books that we're reading. That was what made me the happiest. And I wanted to figure out how to kind of bottle and infuse like that, just like amazing feeling that we get from like a great book club discussion into a digital platform, so that more people can have access to those book club benefits.
Nice. And when you were doing this type of search for the place where to put this book club, why not use already established platforms that already had a bunch of participation or like signups already, right? Like already a lot of eyes on it. Why did you decide to build your own thing?
One of the kind of key values of our company at Italic Type and our brand, and the way that brand experience comes through in the product, is we like to say it's like your peaceful literary oasis online, your peaceful private sort of sun-filled corner of like a library with a great big chair, and there's other people around in like their own reading rooms, and you're part of a bigger community, but you have this like sort of quiet, private space to read and engage with the books that you're reading. That to me is, and what we've built so far, is really quite different from how the rest of the internet often appears and feels as a user. So much of what we're looking at for both social media platforms, and when you click on an article and there's just like 25 ads around the screen, it's also like loud and busy and distracting. And I really think I really felt like there was a need for a much more peaceful and calm environment to think about the books that you want to read, add books to your list, to take notes on the books that you're reading, to share and discuss books with other people. So it's a way of kind of fusing our always on digital world with, at the same time, the need to like step back from it from time to time and get off screen and do something else. At this point, I don't think that the solution is to say like, oh, well, we're going to throw away our phones and our computers and like, never use technology again. Like, no, it's too late. Like it's, it's an ingrained part of our lives, but how can we use it to like fuel our, our well-being and our ability to, like I said, learn and grow together, and not a way to just like always be looking at ads or always be looking at other people's content that makes us feel bad about ourselves, or all the other sort of like attendant things that go along with like these really busy, noisy online environments that we have.
That's really beautiful, and I think I can say that that experience is definitely like lacking online nowadays. And I thought something insightful that you were telling me earlier was about your competition, right? And that this exact topic speaks to who do people think your competition is?
Mm-hmm. Right. So I mentioned that this book club that I've been running in Chicago is a really big inspiration for Italic Type. Another one of our sort of key parts of our founding story that led us to say, okay, we're really gonna do this and create a bank account and put money in that bank account, was the observation that Goodreads, which is the sort of existing incumbent and dominant social network for books, is frankly not that great. And so Goodreads was started in 2007. It was bought by Amazon in 2013. And it looks like it really hasn't been touched in a decade. They have, 80 million users worldwide. And it's just a, sort of old looking mediocre site. So this is not a new idea. Every other day on Twitter, someone's saying like, here's an idea. Someone should create a better Goodreads. A lot of people,
But you did it.
People have tried to do it. We have a few other competitors in the space that have come up recently who are also trying to do something like that. So certainly that is, one of our competitors, but really we see it more as a sort of indication of the market, right? That like we know that there's a market for people who really want to engage online with books, because Goodreads has this has continued to have such a solid user base. How can we do it better? In addition to Goodreads, I also see that our competition is also other things like Netflix and Hulu and Instagram and TikTok and all the other ways that people spend their time during the day when they're not working. So I think one of the problems that Italic Type is trying to solve is this idea that there are people, and this is a problem that I experience myself sometimes too. I love to read. It's not always easy for me to make the decision in the moment that I'm going to read, because I enjoy watching TV as much as the other person, right? Like in that way, it's sort of like working out. I know it's good for me. I know I'm going to feel good, after I do it. I know I'm going to be happy about it, but you're not always, making that choice. And so like, gym buddies sort of had that like social accountability factor. Similarly, that's one of the things that we observed with book clubs, is that social accountability factor to help, motivate you to get over the hump of like, you want to be doing something. We're going to, help you actually do it. Nice. So I think that, that being said, after I've just identified our competitors as Netflix and Hulu and TikTok, that's a challenging battle. That's going against some big headwinds that we have out there in the culture. But I think that there are a lot of people who love to read. There are a lot of people who wish they, could read more. We're focused on how to use technology to kind of magnify the intrinsic rewards that you get in terms of like learning and connecting with other people, to keep reading a incentivized and fun and satisfying and motivating activity.
Absolutely. Well, that was a really good explanation of how companies and apps like Italic Type fight for competition online. Fight for attention, not competition, fight for attention, right? The attention of the person that is using the device online. But I think books have something on those apps that that you can never take away, and is the fact that you could be digital and physical, right? Mm-hmm. So like you cannot necessarily have a movie digital and physical. You cannot have an Instagram that is digital, but you could potentially take your read on the real world and shut down your phone and still be with the book. Have you done is there any insights that you guys found, that your company and you found out about even the ability of like reading a physical book versus reading a book online, and how is the experience molding what are you doing with the app potentially, if at all? I don't know.
Yeah, that's a great question. The mix in terms of like what the data says about reader preferences is about 10 to 14% of people are doing audiobooks. That number is growing. About 15 to 20% of people read exclusively ebooks. And that number has sort of plateaued. It was growing for a little bit, but a couple years ago, it started to level off and has stayed around like 20%. About, 65% or so of readers prefer reading physical books, but will sometimes read books in other formats, but the preference is for physical books. And a smaller minority of people only read physical books. I think it's about 12, 15% or so. When we first started working on Italic Type, one of our conceptions was that we would be for physical book readers only. So part of the idea was, Kindle has a lot of great functionality. You can highlight things and save your highlights, tap on a word and look it up, all these different kind of interesting reading activity enhancements that you can do on Kindle. But what if you're not a Kindle user? What if you prefer reading physical books? How could, we first started thinking, how can we create sort of a digital layer app that will let you do some Kindle-esque things, but for your physical book? That is still a big part of our kind of like company and brand and product identity. I would put myself and my co-founder in the camp of people who prefer reading physical books, but especially during the pandemic over the last year and a half, that mix started to change a little bit. So it just became a lot easier and a lot more convenient to get books from the library on our Kindles, and I started reading more books than I had previously, through that method. And I think that's something that we also found in our user base as well. So we no longer say that we are sort of exclusively for the physical book reader, and we have taken steps in our product to do things like we have a page tracker, for example, but we also let you track by percentage. If you're reading on an ebook, you can toggle between whether or not you want to track your page number or on a percent, that sort of thing. So I think it kind of got us to broaden our minds a little bit. But I will say that there is still this quality, I think, about physical books, and I'm still somebody who, I like to hold it. I like the smell. I like to turn the pages. I'm also, this is a big debate in book world, but I'm a dog ear person, so I don't really use bookmarks. I fold down the corner of the page. I really use my books.
I like to make notes and then give the book away and then hear back about those notes.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things we're trying to do is sort of like digitize that experience, right? So taking notes in one of our features called the book board, and then sharing a book with a friend, and they can see the notes that you've taken, that sort of thing. So yeah, I think sometimes one last thing I'll say about this is, there's a rise of audiobooks, and I think it's interesting. It's great. People ask me sometimes, what do I think about audiobooks? I think if that's the way that people find that they can get into reading and get into engaging with books, like, I think that's great. I think that, something is better than nothing. But I also will have to say that I think reading the actual book instead of listening to it is a little bit of a different, more impactful sort of experience in terms of your ability to retain what you're reading, to make connections to other things that you know and things that happen to you in the future, and connecting back to that book. So I don't know that I totally buy the argument that like audiobooks are just the exact same kind of experience as what reading is, but I think they're a really great on-ramp and a great way for more people to engage more with books and book content.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that recently has happened for me, and I want to know if it potentially maybe happens to you or some of your user base, is I'll buy a book, whether it's physical or Kindle, and I'm home reading it, but then all of a sudden I have to go run an errand. And so I'm like, I don't want to stop reading this.
Yeah.
I need to, like, I'm walking for at least 10 to 15 minutes. Let me get the audiobook, start exactly where at the page where I left off, continue listening, come back, and then switch. And so there's a lot of like switch of format. And I hate to say this because I'm not proud of it, because I feel like I'm getting screwed because I'm buying the audiobook and I'm buying the paper form and or the Kindle thing, and Amazon is making so much money off of me, and it's embarrassing at this point, because none of them are used enough to actually make up for how much they cost this thing, how much this thing costs. So I wish there was a way in which I could switch this type from one type to another type, and not break my bank. That would be
how great would it be if everything was bundled, right? Like you bought a book title, and like within your book purchase, you got it in these different formats, right? You'd get like a physical copy and the ebook. I mean, right. That would be amazing and really awesome.
And I would love for the author to read the book, because there's something about the experience of the author itself reading their book that loves so much more than some random voice reading a book. So that's one of my hang-ups with audiobooks. Like, I would love to, like, the author itself tell me how to read this book the way they intended to. There's some artistry in that I feel like is very much about one of the pleasure of potentially audiobooks.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think one thing that the sort of like the fractured format kind of reality of how books exist today, one of the things that points to is that it's a very complicated area in terms of rights, copyright rights, in terms of metadata. When you are looking for a book online, and the engine that produces the title, the cover art, the author, the description, I think one of the things that we was unanticipated for us as we kind of began the journey of establishing the company and figuring out what our first product was going to be was I think we were sort of naive in thinking that there's going to be a great free API that has really high quality book metadata, that it'll be like really simple to hook up to and access, and that is really not the case at all. And so it is a sort of Byzantine, like labyrinth-esque world that's involved as you start to peel back the layers of the publishing industry and the distribution rights and the metadata and all of these different components. One of the reasons why I think there hasn't been as much innovation in the book space as there ought to be, and why you really just have Amazon as this incredibly dominant player, is that these are, it is a little bit more complicated of a world to navigate and figure out, especially from a technology perspective, because there hasn't been as much investment, frankly, into this area as there has been, technology investments in other sectors.
Oh, wow. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, for the audience that does not like books, we're so sorry. You're going to have to listen to this. You're going to love books by the end of this conversation. But I wanted to talk, finish wrapping up a little bit about Italic Type, and then go into what is it like starting a company, right? For the people that are thinking about it or in the midst of it. So tell us a little bit about what Italic Type has coming up, and then we'll move into starting the company itself.
Okay, great. So for the readers out there listening and want to be readers, please do check out Italic Type. It is a digital platform that we've created to help readers read more books and get more value out of the books that you read. Reading a book is an investment of your time and attention, and when you're done, you want to remember stuff from that book. You want to be able to connect those ideas to other things you're doing in your job or your life, talk to somebody about that book, recommend it to a friend. And so those are all things that Italic Type helps readers do. We launched our first product, the first version of this platform, in December of last year, so December of 2020. It's open to the public now. Anyone can sign up. We have a couple thousand users who are on right now. And this summer, we are planning some really exciting activities and milestones to lead up to a bigger product launch around our native iOS app. So our app will be launching in the App Store by the end of the summer. Right now, you can use Italic Type on the mobile web on your phone, but our native app is going to be a really exciting milestone for us. We're also working on a new podcast and book club program that is going to be hosted by a special celebrity guest.
Ooh, can you tell us who it is? Who's the celebrity?
To be revealed later. We'll be launching more information and more details about that pretty soon here, maybe end of June, July, and have our first episode come out around July. So we're really excited about that as well, and just trying to build momentum and increase awareness and discovery among readers to come and check out Italic Type. And to start using it to what we call manage your book life.
Nice. Yeah. Thank you so much. So there was a day sometime between June and September 2018 when you're like, I'm going to start a company. Right? And then what happened?
Yeah, what was I thinking? Yeah.
You quit your job. By the way, you were working at Clean Energy Trust.
Yeah.
But you also had some experience in VC, right, as well. Would you remind me how that fit into the timeline here?
Absolutely. So my last quote unquote real job before I started my own company was as a director of marketing and communications at an organization called Clean Energy Trust, where I was there for 5 years. Clean Energy Trust is a nonprofit VC whose mission is to invest in early stage clean energy technology companies that are based in the Midwest.
Perfect.
So it was both a taste of VC, but also a lot around kind of what's wrong with VC and why there need to be alternative funding models, because for clean tech innovation, for example, it wasn't a great apples to apples sort of comparison. If a regular old investor off the street was going to decide between investing in an early stage clean tech company or a kind of regular digital B2B SaaS company, the B2B SaaS company is a better fit for the VC model, because with clean tech innovation, there's longer time horizons, there's more upfront capital costs, and there's a lower return profile. So that's a hard sell, right? At the same time, there really should be more dollars and more funding going towards innovating in this particular area. So that's sort of the environment that I came from Clean Energy Trust.
Yeah, and you were telling me, sorry to interrupt, but You're telling me that about the VC model as well. And before we jump forward, I wanted to, like, when you said like there should be a different model, you already gave me an example about a different type of investment. Was there any other bias that you saw, especially since you're a woman in tech? We know women are usually underfunded. Black women are even less funded than, white cis males in or generally white males in tech and VC world. Anything else that you notice that can give us insight on how we might change the model or the system?
Yeah. So there are all these areas that I think are very good candidates, very, worthy and in fact necessary candidates that like require more funding. Clean energy innovation is one of them. Different types of solutions that serve, underrepresented communities and innovation, like people of color and women, are absolutely part of the story. I think part of the problem is that the VC model is about making, a lot of bets, but you need one or two of the bets that you make to deliver that like home run return. So when people talk about unicorns, that's what the model is after. They want to invest in companies that have the potential to have $1 billion exit, to return over 10x of the original investment that was put in. But for clean energy companies, for example, that's a lot less possible. It doesn't mean that they're not good businesses, and it doesn't mean that you wouldn't get a good return, or that this isn't an area that really like needs funding anyway. It's just that it has, from a model and like mathematical standpoint, a lower probability of returning the same type of investment. And so because of that, there are so many areas and so many sectors and so many types of founders, so many types of founders who are not positioned well to be good candidates for investment in this particular way. And that's fine for the model, but the problem is that the VC model has become the main way that innovation gets funded in this country. Today, federal spending on research and development is at the lowest point as a percentage of GDP than it's been in like 60 years. It's lower today as a percentage of GDP than it was in the early 60s.
Wow.
And so the vacuum that has created, means that we're relying on VCs more and more to be kind of making up the difference to fund, our innovation. But they have a very specific point of view.
Goal in mind, and it is to make 10x, right? At the end of the day.
Right. And so we're losing this like base of more like public oriented type of like support and innovation that really could have a lot of like meaningful impacts for a lot of people, but it's something that the VC model has blinders on. So that's just
that makes a lot of sense. How did you learn this? Was that part of the like trying to raise money process?
I was absolutely exposed to this notion when I was working at Clean Energy Trust, because the whole mission behind Clean Energy Trust was like, how do we develop alternative funding pathways and structures to kind of address this problem? But it goes beyond clean energy, right? So when I see, every year for the last, 5 or 6 years, every year there's a report that comes out that says, women, as a broad category, only receive 2% of VC funding, and this is a huge problem, and we really need to do something about it. And every single year it stays the same. Like every year it's like it's 2%, and it was 2% last year, or 2.1, or
we should do something about
it, right? And at some point, I think we just have to ask ourselves, for everyone's best intention around diversity, let's think of diversity in a bigger way than just like women or race or people of color, but like diversity in the return profile on your portfolio. Does every single company that you invest in need to have this potential to be a $1 trillion like world dominating force? There are plenty of businesses out there that are good businesses that would that would return 2x 3x, good investment to make, but that's just not what the expectation is today.
Yeah, absolutely. Which leads me to think that I absolutely agree with you. There should be other type of investors and or a different type of investment model portfolio. And so, did you face some of these issues as you were raising money for? And have you raised money?
So this kind of leads, to what which I will. So we haven't raised any money for Italic Type. We've been working on it for a couple years. We're bootstrapping, and so we fund it ourselves. I hustle part-time as a freelance writer to help fund the company and continue our development. My ideal scenario would be to continue pushing on some of our traction and milestones that we talked about for this summer. Have some really great results to tell a great story, and my ideal scenario would be to raise like a small pre-seed round towards the end of this year, maybe like 500K or so, and that's it. Like, use that money to really achieve some like great growth, to get us into profitability range, to keep pushing on that margin. But I don't think we are a good candidate for, really, really big rounds of investment right now, because quite honestly, we're still working through our product market fit. We're still working through our ideal customer profile, and we're still working through the details of our business model. And I want to, establish those things on my terms, kind of according to my values and what I care about, instead of having the strings attached to someone else's agenda.
Absolutely. Makes total sense. And I'm glad that you've defined that for yourself. I saw on your website, Italic Type is not completely free, or it's free right now, but it won't be free forever, which means that it'll be a more secure product, a more self-sustaining platform. You won't necessarily rely on advertising or sponsorship in order to continue to build your company, which, as you may know, is definitely becoming more of a popular model for more like long-term sustainability of tech companies.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to take you back for 1 second, and I hope you have a little bit more time, but take you back one moment to 2018.
Yes.
You said that you wanted to start a company.
Yeah.
Do you have any savings? Give us like a little bit of like a general profile view of like, I want to start a company. But, did you have any savings? Did you know people that wanted to start this company with you? How did that all work out?
Sure, absolutely. So a little bit more about my background is that my father's a VC.
Really?
Yes. So my father's a VC and a serial entrepreneur. Has been my whole life.
Apparently you're two now, so welcome to the club.
Sorry, what?
I said apparently you are two now, following your dad's footsteps.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So it is a little bit of a family business. My grandfather, my dad's dad, was also his own business owner, and so it's definitely sort of in the family line. When I grew up, I was born the year that my dad started his first company called Whitewater Group in Evanston. So in the 80s and 90s, entrepreneurship was not as popular of a idea or a concept that like everyone knew about. So when I was a kid, it was kind of like, what does your dad do? Like, I'm like, oh, he always has different jobs. Like, he's always, doing different things. But so having that experience, like, growing up, and it was certainly something that, we would talk at dinner about pitches he had seen that day and like go through pitch decks together and like what was good, what was good and not. So it was, kind of in the air and water and osmosis, a little bit effect from when I was younger. And I also, kind of grew up with like the idea of like people start companies, and this is like a normal, like regular thing that is, sort of like accepted. And like, when I told my parents that this is what I was going to do, nobody raised an eyebrow, sort of thing. They were like,
wow, that's cool.
Great. So I think having that background like absolutely informs my sort of risk tolerance profile and kind of comfort level with the idea of this being, something that is, it is not just like something that normal people do, but just is an admirable, sort of positive thing to like really try to go for it. And I think another thing is that my co-founder is my husband.
Okay.
So that, also kind of is a different dynamic, although there are, quite a number of married co-founders out there. One of the things that drew my husband and I together when we were first dating is like, he's also a startup guy, and he's been involved in doing tech startups for a long time, for basically his whole career. And we had always talked about, in sort of a imaginary list sort of way, like, what sort of company would we do, and what are the problems that we think are important to solve? When we started Italic Type, it just so happened to kind of come at this moment of time where he had been the CTO of Bucket Feet, which was a Chicago footwear company that had got sold to Threadless. And that had happened around the same time that when I was at Clean Energy Trust, I was ready for the next thing, but I didn't know what it was going to be. I'd been there for 5 years. It's sort of like a small nonprofit. So we were kind of both in this sort of pause, kind of what's next sort of place in our careers. And we started getting more serious about this sort of imaginary list that we had been creating, like putting it down on paper, like what, maybe this is the time for us to do it. And before we had kids, what would we do? And we're both huge readers. We actually got married at the Chicago Public Library. Carol, before we even knew we were going to do anything.
Yeah,
because we just love books and we love libraries. And the problem that we kept on coming back to again and again for ourselves that we really cared about was this idea that it's hard, that we had trouble reading as much as we wanted to be reading, like really engaging with books and with communities around books as much as we wanted to be. How, there's Goodreads, but we don't really want to use that. So isn't there something better? And there wasn't. And, then kind of like one thing led to another.
Oh, that's awesome. That's a beautiful founder story. That's awesome. And so tell us a little bit about maybe biggest lessons learned as a founder. You've just opened up your platform just during the pandemic, which probably has been a great way where people can connect with each other, which is fantastic. Biggest challenges, maybe things that surprised you a little bit as well.
Sure. So I just, talked a little bit about, I had a lot of familiarity around entrepreneurship from my dad and also from my work experience at Clean Energy Trust. So I felt like I had, a lot of knowledge like around the topic, but this is my first time being a founder myself, and that is a different thing.
Yeah.
So I remember at Clean Energy Trust, for example, as the marketing and communications person, part of my job was to work with the entrepreneurs that we had invested in on their pitches and like their communication materials and their elevator pitch statements and things like that. And I remember, sort of critiquing people's like statements and, kind of giving authoritative advice around like, it's got to be more like this or more like this. And then as I kind of came onto the other side of the table as a founder myself, I did have these moments thinking like, man, it really is hard. Like I don't know if I totally appreciate, it's hard to make like the perfect, one sentence elevator pitch statement. I think I maybe sort of took that for granted a little bit or didn't entirely have that full perspective. So there's certainly things like that I've, realized over time. And I think another thing that I would say is, you're never ready. I don't think I was ready to start a company. I just did it, and over time I learned more and I grew more comfortable in certain areas, and I'm glad that I didn't wait until I was ready, because I don't think that's something that most people at least would ever feel, or I don't think I would feel like, great, I know exactly what I'm doing now. I know exactly what this is going to be. You're jumping into a sort of like wild and weird and uncertain experience.
Yeah.
One thing that I believe is true that has sort of like helped me come through some of my, more doubt-filled moments is it's an educational experience. I thought for a long time about going to grad school and getting my MBA somewhere. And in some ways, I think this is sort of like a self-directed MBA with some potential upside. More so than an MBA would have. And so at the very, very least, if like nothing else happens, and I don't believe that that's going to be the case, but I've learned so much, and I continue to learn so much, and so I think like, hey, it's kind of like cheaper than getting an so far. I mean, we've done it like really, really lean and scrappy, but so far it's not like we're spending more money than I would spend if I got an MBA, and I get to learn through doing so much of what that would cover.
Absolutely. Well, I admire your resilience, and I'm excited to see your growth and learn from you all, honestly, too, like about what is it like to be a serial entrepreneur. Is it, just a quick question before we wrap up here, because we're a little bit over time, but do you call your dad sometimes and be like, Dad, oh my God?
Yes, I do.
That's awesome. What does he say usually?
Well, it depends. Usually I'm calling him around either like good highs or like there's a really big problem.
Yeah.
Like there's not a lot like in between, but if there's really, really good news, like of course I'm so excited to share with him. And sometimes like we find ourselves in like a trickier situation, and it is really, really nice just to be able to know that in a speed dial sort of way I can pick up the phone and just say like, hey, what do you think about this? Like, so a lot of times it's like, should we be worried about this? Like, how worried should we be? And it's nice to have that perspective as well.
Oh, nice. Does he have a go-to dad statement that he likes to give you, or dad lesson? And remember what dad says, kind of thing.
I think like he loves like, just really like the focus on the user. He's all about like surprising and delighting the user and really like mining emotional experiences. So something he always is talking to me about is not just thinking about the user journey sort of like from, one feature on your app to the next feature, but also really writing out like the emotional journey that is a part of that. So what are they feeling, also when they're going from place to place. And so sometimes that is sort of like his his repeat mantra. And sometimes I'm like, yes, that I know, like the emotional journey.
Yeah. That's beautiful advice. I love it. Would you give me one moment? I need to see if my daughter is okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
One second, Emily. Sorry.
That's okay.
And then we started crying. Still take her. Okay, we're finishing up here. Last few questions.
Okay.
All right, so thank you so much for coming to the podcast. I have a couple of more questions for you to just finish it up. You ready for the good ones?
Yes.
All right, so what is a book you have gifted the most? What do you give me one of your favorites?
Yeah. There's two books that I recommend a lot.
Okay.
One is called Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke. It's a nonfiction, sort of businessy type related book. She is a PhD psychologist, but also a professional poker player. And he talks about her experience as a professional poker player in about evaluating probabilities and making decisions in life with a more probabilistic mindset. It's a book that has really helped me feel more comfortable about making certain decisions, because her thesis is that you can make the best possible decision with the best information that you have at the moment and still have an adverse outcome. That's what luck is. That's what like sort of the randomness of life is. And that bad outcome does not mean that you made a bad decision. You made a good decision that had a 80% chance of success and a 20% chance of failure. Like that's still a good bet, but nothing that you can do can be 100% guaranteed. And so I think people, can get really like worried and twist themselves like up into knots around like, am I making a good decision or not? Like, what if it doesn't work out? But it sort of separates the am I making a good decision piece from like what's going to happen, because, no one can tell you what's going to happen. So I found that to be a really helpful framework and something that I like to recommend to people. So it's a good book. And then the other book that I recommend a lot and is one of my personal favorites, it's funny, these are both nonfiction, but I love fiction as well, but I just, I don't know, nonfiction kick right now. But the other one is called Amusing Ourselves to Death by Neil Poston. And it's a book about how it's from the 90s, and it's kind of very prophetic, though. Like reading it today, it almost sounds like he's talking about the media environment of today, but basically about how the values of entertainment have sort of seeped into other aspects of the culture, like education and religion and politics. Such that when we make everything about entertaining ourselves, and if entertainment is like the number one value that we have, what do we lose from doing that? And what is the price that we pay, and like the cost? And he thinks there's a steep one, and I do too.
Nice.
Yeah.
That is very interesting. I'm gonna have definitely to read both of those, and I'm thinking about younger generation, how they're growing up with entertainment being the number one. I want to say number one, but like definitely top priority or top things that happen around them. So that is going to be a good read. I can tell already.
So what I'm going to do, Marina, is recommend those books to you on Italic Type.
Perfect.
That way, I can like recommend to you on the platform. And when you start reading it, I'll get notified, and then we can like have a chat on it and, you know, check in. It'll be fun.
Beautiful. We'll love to.
Cool.
What is a book you would write?
Well, this idea for a book I would write that I have been percolating on a little bit may not be surprising from the interview that we just had. I have been increasingly very interested in like the history of VC and some of the good things that the proliferation of VC and more investment dollars has done. Because I think there are some good things, but like we talk about, there's different ways that the model, I think, limits our access to innovation as a society, and I think it's just an interesting big topic that one day deserves a book. Maybe.
Absolutely. And I hope you put it on Italic Type and you recommend it as well. So yeah. I'll see it coming. Anything, any one thing, either, I'm gonna wrap it up with this one. What is one fun thing we don't know about you?
One fun thing about me is that I grew up being a big reader, but I was also really, as a lot of kids are, really into animals, but not in a like hang out with animals on a farm sort of way. I liked reading a lot of books about animals. So one of the things I did a lot of was I read and had memorized like a lot of animal facts and a lot of different animal species. And so I just know a lot of like, you know, sort of like very specific like types of birds and types of like deer and elk and like, you know, things like this. There's a New York Times spelling bee game that I don't know if you play, but it's just kind of one of these fun, like a crossword puzzle word games. And a lot of times I'll play with my husband and I'll get all these like random like animal words a lot. And he's just like, man, it's so weird that you know all that stuff.
I was going to ask if it's helped in any way. It seems like you need to monetize this skill, really.
Yeah, yeah, right. A lot of like, you know, a lot of random animal facts. A lot of, I'm decent at trivia, a lot of like random, you know, trivia knowledge. You know, one thing that I think, you know, slightly different topic, but I'm kind of a generalist and I'm a humanities person. I mean, I'm genuinely interested and curious about like a lot of different topics, and I love science, you know, also and all these different things. And I think that, you know, there's just this sort of, you know, kind of insistent, you know, trend on focusing on STEM and, you know, getting more women in STEM, and that's all great, and that should absolutely be what's happening. But I just don't want us, like, you know, generally as a society to lose, you know, focus or value on the humanities, on like the value of being a generalist. And, you know, it's, you know, it's okay not to be an engineer. You know, I don't know, like it's okay to, you know, genuinely be really curious about a lot of different areas and a lot of different topics, and not to know what you're doing and try to make the best of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. That was actually beautiful. So many people and women, even in my field, put themselves, give themselves so much pressure about wanting to be like the guy, quote unquote, I'm quoting, like the guys, like the tech guys, versus like just tap into your own potential, tap into your own strength.
Yeah.
And be who you are. And if you love tech but also love random facts about animals, then Emily, you're an inspiration. Thank you so much for doing the work that you do. Thank you for starting a company and developing more innovation here in Chicago. And thank you for being in the good fight.
Thanks, Marina. It was such a pleasure talking to you. And I love the work that you're doing on the podcast, and can't wait to listen to more episodes.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Bye. Yeah.